Welcome to Professional Day. Center for Teaching thanks you for taking this time out at a time that we know is very busy for you. We're looking forward to having a lively discussion about something that impacts us all, about mental health. We will start the day with a keynote speaker. Amanda Ferrari is here from Reliance Health. Then it will be followed by a series of forums where we get to look at different points of view and have a question and answer. Is what we are doing working or not? What we could be doing better. So again, thank you for being here. We look forward to having a great day.
Hi, good morning. My name is Amanda Ferrari. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Connecticut. And today we will be discussing how our society programs us to avoid talking about mental health, the stigma of mental health, how college students can often suffer in silence, and what we can do about it. There is a higher rate of mental health stressors on community colleges. And this is due to many students choosing community colleges because they maybe aren't ready to leave home. They have financial stressors, possible flexibility of schedules, or they might be the primary caregivers. All of these stressors have great impact on mental health. So here are some of our objectives today. What is mental illness and how is it defined? What are the most prevalent mental health diagnoses among college students? What are the signs and symptoms? What is stigma and how can it prevent people from seeking the services that they need? And most of all, how can we help? So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, defines a mental disorder as a syndrome characterized by a clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in psychological, biological, or developmental processes underlying a mental functioning. This basically means that the conditions and symptoms of the diagnosis interfere with a person's daily life. And so that's what you're going to see going through the theme of the day, is that we have everyday stressors, and it's about managing them. Is it interrupting with our daily life? And the focus on that today. So some of this presentation will go into diagnosing and the importance of understanding clinical and mental health definitions. It can help us to better understand early signs and symptoms that struggling college students may be facing. It can help you as educators to identify possible students experiencing the struggles. And so the DSM defines this as patients must display a behavioral or psychological pattern that reflects painful symptoms, impairment in functioning. It's not an expectable response. It's not a culturally sanctioned response. The diagnostic reliability and validity, and clinical utility. So going back to it's not an expectable response, what that really means is that, so if someone is suffering from grief, they just lost a partner or a friend, there's an expectable amount of time that someone is going to grieve. But let's fast forward to 2 or 3 years later, if that person is still suffering through the major signs and symptoms of grief, there's something going on, and it's interrupting their daily life. It's not a culturally sanctioned response. I like to point this one out because we live in such a multicultural world. So, according to the DSM-5, if you're hearing voices, that's a sign that something might be wrong. But the DSM-5 goes based off of the American culture. So in other cultures, maybe if you're Haitian, sometimes when somebody is going through grief, they hear the voices of a loved one, and that's the grieving process in that particular culture. So that's where that comes in. The National Alliance for Mental Illness, which is NAMI, conducted a survey comprised of 765 individuals diagnosed with a mental health condition who were enrolled in college. The survey asked them a variety of questions related to their experiences living with a mental health condition while attending colleges, and what services and supports they value most as students. The big four were depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and schizophrenia. So depression is more than just feeling really down or having the blues. Feeling sad is usually only a very small portion of what goes on. Some people with depression may not feel sad at all, but be more irritable or lose interest in things they usually like to do. Depression interferes with daily life and normal functioning. Due to the pressures that students are under with regards to grades, working, finances, social obligations. They often ignore or try to hide symptoms. They don't want to seem as if they can't cut it. This is such a big transition for them. If the student has been experiencing any of the following signs or symptoms for nearly every day for the past 2 weeks, it could be considered major or clinical depression. So if the student is feeling any persistent sadness, anxiousness, and an empty mood, feelings of hopelessness, pessimism, feelings of guilt or worthlessness or helplessness, loss of interest of pleasure or hobbies that they used to enjoy, decreased energy or fatigue, or feeling of slowing down, difficulty concentrating, remembering, and making decisions, difficulty sleeping, early morning awakening or oversleeping, appetite change or unwanted weight changes, thoughts of death or suicide attempts, restlessness or irritability, or persistent physical symptoms such as muscle pain or headaches. A lot of the times when you're ignoring these symptoms, your body's trying to tell you something. That's why it comes out as headaches or muscle pains. And students may have a difficult time verbalizing the change in their mood. A student who is usually eager for an 8 a.m. class, I don't know how many of those there are, might suddenly stop coming, or the quality of their work might dip. These are things that can indicate that a student may be falling behind due to depression. Motivation will often decrease and the student can isolate. He or she might not be socializing as much and have taken a step back from former responsibilities. So you're really looking for if maybe the student was participating in several other groups, and then they start stepping back and you realize they're not really coming to your extracurriculars anymore. That could be a definite sign. The next one is bipolar disorder. It's sometimes referred to manic depressive disorder, and it's characterized by dramatic shifts in mood, energy, and activity levels that affect a person's ability to carry out day-to-day tasks. These shifts in mood and energy levels are more severe than the normal ups and downs that everybody experiences. The most common types of bipolar disorder are 1 and 2. Bipolar disorder 1 is defined by manic episodes that last at least 7 days, or by manic symptoms that are so severe the person needs immediate hospital care. Usually depressive episodes occur as well, lasting about 2 weeks, sometimes more. Bipolar 2 disorder is defined by a pattern of depressive episodes and hypomanic episodes. A hypomanic episode, it's not as extreme as a manic episode, so the student has more energy. It's not increased energy. However, some people enjoy the hypomanic because you don't really get the fallout sometimes of taking on maybe 3 jobs in a manic episode. So the hypomanic, a lot of times you have that increased energy and you can keep up with it, but that doesn't mean that the student doesn't feel, or the person doesn't feel the depressive side of it after. So here are some signs and symptoms. People with bipolar disorder experience periods of unusual intense emotion, changes in sleep patterns and activity levels, and behavior that is unusual for them. These distinctive periods are called mood episodes. Mood episodes are drastically different from moods and behaviors that are typical of the person. Extreme changes in energy and activity and sleep go along with mood episodes. So here are some signs: feeling very up, hyper, high or elated, having a lot of energy, increased levels of activity, feeling jumpy or wired, having trouble sleeping, becoming more active than usual, talking really fast about a lot of different things, so you're having trouble keeping up with them when you're having a conversation with them, being agitated, irritable, or touchy. They feel like their thoughts are going very fast. It's that rapid thought process, and thinking they can do a lot of things at once. Sometimes it's even as bold as doing risky things like spending a lot of money or having reckless sex. So doing a lot of things at once, I once had someone come to me and tell me that they got 3 full-time jobs. Wow. It was a sign that they were going to a manic phase, and we discussed this beforehand, where, what are some signs and symptoms? That was definitely one. And it was hard to reason with her that the human body cannot work 3 full-time jobs at once. But it's okay. You get there. The following are symptoms of a depressive episode. So students may realize that something feels off or wrong when in a depressive episode after coming from a manic episode, and they may not understand why there is this loss of energy, or they lost the ability to focus. So it's feelings of being sad, down, depressed or empty, or hopelessness, having very little energy, having a decrease in activity levels, having trouble sleeping, where they're sleeping too much or they're sleeping too little. They feel like they can't enjoy anything. They feel worried and empty. They have trouble concentrating. They forget a lot. They eat too much or too little. They feel tired or slowed down. And there are these excessive thoughts about death or suicide. So the depression can compress upon itself after a manic episode because a week ago, let's say the student was able to do all these things. They had the energy, they were up, they were participating in all these activities, and then suddenly the next day they can't get out of bed. They're dragging, they're waking up later and later every day, and they just don't understand why this has happened, and so they become depressed because they think there's something wrong with them. They don't understand that there's help. Which leads to anxiety. I am basically a big ball of anxiety all the time. That's why I actually carry this rock around. I twirl it in my hand because I get freaked out by a lot of things. So just wanted to let you know, anxiety happens to everyone. Experiencing anxiety is a normal part of life, but people with anxiety disorders frequently have intense, excessive, and persistent worry and fear about everyday situations. Often, anxiety disorders involve repeated episodes of sudden feelings of intense anxiety and fear or terror, and they can peak within minutes, causing a panic attack. These feelings of anxiety and panic interfere with daily activities. They are difficult to control, are out of proportion to the actual danger, and can last a long time. People may avoid places or situations to prevent these feelings from occurring. Students may have to be anxious. Students have a lot to be anxious about. So midterms, papers, finals, internships. There's just so many things. But anxiety becomes a problem when the paper or assignment has taken up most of the student's space in their mind. So no matter what she tries, she just can't relax. The sense of feeling restlessness just doesn't go away. This is when there's something more than just typical anxiety. So they're feeling really nervous, restless, and tense. There's a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom. Having increased heart rate, breathing rapidly, which is hyperventilation, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, having trouble sleeping, even GI problems can happen, having difficulty controlling worry, the urge to avoid things that trigger anxiety, trouble concentrating or thinking about anything other than the present moment. So again, if you notice, it's a lot. There are physical symptoms that go with this. Sweating, trembling, feeling weak. This is your body trying to signal to you that there's something more going on, that your body is in this fight or flight, and it doesn't go well. So when your body is telling you these things, please don't ignore it. If your gas light goes on in your car, you're not going to be like, well, it's fine, I'm going to drive for 20 more miles. You're going to get gas. Your body's telling you the same thing. So please don't ignore those things. And if you're driving without gas, please don't. That's a bad thing. Like, I feel like I don't say that. So according to NAMI, about 2.4 million people in the U.S. suffer from schizophrenia. With such a small percentage of the population, you might think, well, why is it listed here? And the answer to that is that schizophrenia usually has an onset ranging from about age 17 to 24. There are outliers, but usually that's the age range, which is about college age. And schizophrenia is a serious mental disorder in which people can interpret reality differently or abnormally. Schizophrenia may result in some combination of hallucinations, delusions, and extremely disorganized thinking and behavior that impairs daily functioning. So delusions are these false beliefs that are not based in reality. For example, a student might think that they are the center of an elaborate conspiracy. Hallucinations usually involve seeing or hearing things that don't exist. Yet for the person with schizophrenia, they have the full force and impact of normal experiences. Hallucinations can be in any of the senses, but hearing voices is usually the most common. And so when I say things like having the full force of the impact of the hallucination, they actually hear people. They may actually sense somebody's tapping them, or they may sense somebody's touching them. So, and sometimes they see them. So that's why I say it's not real to us, but it is obviously a real experience for them. So that's a scary thing. Disorganized thinking or speech is when effective communication is impaired. The answers to questions may be partially or completely unrelated. Sometimes speech may include putting together meaningless words that can't be understood, sometimes known as word salad. Extremely disorganized or abnormal motor behavior. This may show in a number of ways, from acting like a child to unpredictable agitation. Behavior isn't focused on a goal, so it's hard for them to do a task. Behavior can also include resistance to instructions, inappropriate or bizarre posturing, a complete lack of response, or useless and excessive movements. So it's a little bit of that motor restlessness, that constant fluttering, that constant tapping of the leg. And some negative symptoms, this refers to reduced or lack of ability to function normally. For example, the person may neglect personal hygiene or appear to lack emotion. They don't make eye contact, they don't change facial expressions, they speak monotone. Also, the person may have lost interest in everyday activities and socially withdraw or lack the ability to experience pleasure. So I'm going to show a video next. And this video is just some of the things that we've discussed and some of the signs and symptoms. And it's about students' progression of mental I'm sure you noticed that there weren't any spoken words in that video, but the points about stigma, symptoms, treatment, they were all pretty clear. Sometimes mental health struggles aren't super clear to people, and they don't always verbally reach out. Sometimes mental health isn't so overt. So how did you notice there were some problems with the students? What were some of the things that you saw that were discussed on previous slides? Anybody? Waking up later, right? He was progressively waking up later.
He had disillusions about his friends.
Yes, he had disillusions about his friends. So some of his friends seemed to have that negative stigma that we're going to go into, but his friends also tried to reach out to him. And as you saw, the shimmery thing was just kind of sitting on him, telling him he can't do it. And so that kind of gets into your head too. Anything else?
His grades were slipping.
His grades were slipping, yeah, that's a big one. Anything else?
He kept telling himself he was fine.
He kept telling himself he was fine, right? And then when he went to the doctor, he realized that his diagnosis doesn't necessarily make him who he is. It happens to be a part of him. And by the end of the video, you see that the little shimmer is still there. And much like mental health, you can't just make it go away all the time. Sometimes it exists in your life, and you have to learn to live around it. So he was trying exercise, it looked like. He was trying to go back to school. Routine is really good. And hopefully his friends aren't such jerks later on, and he can explain to them later like what happened. But anything else? Any more comments before we move on? Okay, so here's some statistics. There we go. So approximately 75% of mental health conditions begin by age 24, making college a critical time to focus on mental health, especially as students transition away from their support systems and finding more and more pressures in their life. 1 in 5 young adults suffer through a mental health condition. Think of how big your classes can be sometimes. Sometimes there's 30 students, sometimes there are entire lecture halls. 30% of college students reported feeling so down that they just could not function. 80% felt overwhelmed by all of their responsibilities. And I'm surprised this number isn't higher. I'm surprised it's not 100%. I'm always overwhelmed by my responsibilities. With all of these numbers, how do we know that it's severe, out of control risk-taking? Sudden overwhelming fear for no reason. Not eating, throwing up, or using laxatives to lose weight. So again, that's that weight fluctuation that happens. Seeing, hearing, or believing that things are not real. Repeatedly and excessively using drugs or alcohol. Drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, or sleeping habits. Extreme difficulty in concentrating or staying still. Intense worries or fears that get in the way of daily activities, and trying to harm oneself or planning to do so. So, again, you have to look at it. I understand that sometimes it's college and people do drugs and alcohol. That's just the world we live in. But it's the excessiveness of it. It's when it starts interfering with their life, their work, their friendships, their relationships. That's when it becomes a sign. So according to NAMI, people living with a serious mental illness have a life expectancy that is 25 years less than other Americans. Sometimes it's difficult to look back and understand the struggles of a student, and generally people, once they're done with school, they say, well, I did it, so what's the problem? Or my other students are fine. But remember, we're trying to support the percentage of students who might not be fine or falling through the cracks because they're afraid of stigma. And we want to let students know that talking about mental health is a good thing. It keeps the conversation open and reduces stigma. Helping students identify their stressors can also help them confront their mental health challenges and struggles. So here are the top stressors identified for college students: relationship breakups, academic pressures, poor grades, financial stresses, social status pressures, feeling alone or homesick, feeling marginalized, misunderstood, or like you don't fit in, concern or worry about your family at home, loss of day-to-day family or community support, drug or alcohol use, inadequate sleep, feeling overwhelmed, having grief, gender and sexuality questioning, friendship challenges, sports team losses, and unmet expectations. I think that one goes for everybody. As adults, we look back and we say, I go through this too. I just had a breakup, or the Patriots are playing on Sunday, so that's gonna be really stressful. Am I going to work and they didn't win? But remember that these are usually young adults making a transition from a highly structured environment where they had to ask permission to use the bathroom. Now they have all this newly found freedom and pressures, and they may not know what to do with it. So of the NAMI survey, a surprisingly high percentage, 73%, mentioned they experienced a mental health crisis while at school. These survey respondents shared what triggered their mental health crises and how well their colleges respond in the crisis. In most cases, colleges were not even aware of the mental health crises the students experienced. Here are some of the top reasons why students felt they were in crisis. So extreme feelings of anxiety, panic, depression, about school and life in general, difficulty adjusting to the new routine and environment, feeling homesick, loneliness, or isolation, stress or overwhelmed about course load, post-traumatic stress disorder episode triggered by class content, medication stopped working. So remember, respondents of the survey reported that the college didn't even know what was going on with them. So this must have been a very isolating feeling for them. It's scary. You're away from home. You don't know who to rely on. You don't know who you can trust. So how do we help? And to be honest with you, talking about mental health openly like this is a big help. And it's just like we're doing here. We want to help the students and reduce stigma as much as possible. So a student says, I was concerned that the information would become part of a permanent record that could be viewed negatively. I still feel there's a lot of stigma, and benefits of disclosing do not outweigh the risks. Many young adults go without mental health supports due to preconceived notions about how they will be treated by others. A large barrier to treatment is stigma. Just like the student stated, labels can create preconceived notions that unfairly stigmatize people and can bias our perceptions of their past and present behavior. A lot of students may avoid discussing their symptoms because labels create this negative image of self or an inaccurate picture of the person as a whole. So where does this stigma come from? Although stigma exists in a variety of places, because we live in such a technology-driven society, I'm going to focus on mental illness and the media, how it can either hinder or help a student. A lot of the time when something negative happens, like a school shooting, one of the biggest questions is, does he have a mental disorder? Is he sick? Like, that's going to explain everything. Like, people with mental health diagnoses are eventually going to harm someone. Not true. With focus on questions like these, students often do not want to disclose their own mental health issues and avoid getting the help they need. So a lot of the times newspapers and magazines focus on dangerousness as a common theme. And they rarely ever print any positive articles. Television and film, they often associate with criminal behavior and violence. Look at all the things like SVU, Criminal Minds, or NCIS. These are all things that use mental health or mental illness as a plot proponent. So here are the top 5 reasons why students do not disclose. Fear or concern for the impact disclosing would have on the student and faculty's perceiving the person in general, there is no opportunity to disclose. The diagnosis does not impact academic performance. They do not know that disclosing could help secure accommodations, or they do not trust that their medical information will remain confidential. And the first one is that students, they don't want to be seen as different. Here are some real statistics regarding mental illness and criminality, though. People suffering from mental health issues are continually stereotyped by the media, resulting in a negative stigma. Think about all the movies that you've seen that portray a person with mental health as the villain or the enemy. In reality, people who suffer from mental health and illness are more likely to be victims of a crime. Of the population, about 20% have a mental health diagnosis. 5.4% are considered severely mental ill. Of the, people who are considered to have a diagnosis of severe and persistent mental illness are 8 times more likely to be robbed, 15 times more likely to be assaulted, and 23 times more likely to be raped than the general population. This shows that there is a greater vulnerability than the media portrays. To really drive this point home, only 1 in 14,300,000 have a chance of being murdered by a stranger with schizophrenia. These are very overwhelming numbers when you think about it. They're staggering. However, mental illness in the media isn't always bad. Thankfully, there's been a push for more support around mental health in the media. Movies and TV give a voice to something that can be hard to describe and can make the topic approachable. Students can see themselves on film and TV and think of themselves as not alone. Think of why we push for more diversity and inclusion on TV shows and in film. It helps to normalize what was previously taboo. The internet is not all bad. It's not just trolls and funny cat memes. It can be a positive platform for people to come together and find support. There are even online therapists, right here, an online therapist. But a great example of somebody using the media to reach others is Kevin Hines. So Kevin Hines is the man who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived. I think it's important to share a story because this really sums up everything that we've talked about so far. And I think Kevin Hines had spoken here with Reliance Health at some point. Yeah.
Are you okay? Is something wrong? Or can I help you? Those were the words that I desperately wanted to hear as I stood atop the Golden Gate Bridge walkway, staring and leaning over the 4-foot-nothing rail, peering down to the looming waters below. My name is Kevin Hines, and this is my story. I think to do this story any real justice, we must go back to the very beginning. The day I was born. August 30th, 1981, in the great city of San Francisco in this beautiful state. I was born to biological parents Marcia Silvera and Martino Perales. They had 2 things going for them. They had their immeasurable love for one another, and they had, in my humble opinion, 2 beautiful infant baby boys. One then named Giovanni, and one Jordache. They had those 2 things going for them, but they had a great many things going against them. Addicted to hardcore drugs and alcohol. But before that, diagnosed with manic depression. I know they wanted to keep us near them, raise us, except for the fact that on a regular basis, Martino and Marcia would leave Jordache and I in seedy crack motels to go score or do drugs. They would leave us screaming and crying, lying in our own filth for days. Until one seedy motel clerk made what I call his most unseedy decision. He called the police. And they took us and placed us into Child Protective Services with the idea that we would be placed into foster care. A system that in San Francisco at that time was in shambles, letting kids age out to 18 into homelessness, which still happens. Letting other kids be abused by their foster parents. People often say to me, well, why does that matter? You were an infant. How did that affect you? We all know in this room that the first 3 to 9 months of any infant's life are the most crucial for their adaptation, coping skills, ability to connect. Yeah, I had none of that. Lost my brother, bounced around from home to home to home, having a new mom and dad every couple of weeks or days. I had nothing to adapt to, no one to hold on to. And so I developed, at a very young age, severe abandonment issues and a serious detachment disorder. And as I grew older, I thought to myself, well, you know what, I could grow up, I'd be like my dad, be a banker. I could be like my mom, I could be a nurse. Heck, I can do anything I set my little heart to. Except for the fact that at 17 and a half, like a Mack truck barreling down the road at 75 miles an hour, it hit me. Boom. Extreme paranoia. Like it was out of nowhere. This mania would lead me to do things that were absolutely ridiculous. During these manic highs, these delusions of grandeur, such dark times, such self-loathing, such inner voice hatred. When my father was in his room working, studying, reading, writing, I was in the bathroom, peering in the mirror, loathing every fiber of my being. From 17 and a half to about 19 years of age, I'm battling this up and down, up and down. Now, I'm taking medication here and there, and sometimes not at all. But somehow I was able to pretend to my family that I was okay. At 19 years of age, in September, it got to be too much of a burden on my soul. At 7 in the morning on the 25th, my father entered my room. He looked upon me, he said, Kevin, I'm very worried about you and I don't know what to do. Why don't you come to work with me today? So my father, we got in the car. We drove to City College, a kitty corner on the side of City College, San Francisco. And as I looked at my father knowing what I was going to do, I felt not for what he would feel. I felt only pain, the common denominator in those who attempt and die by suicide with mental struggles, that epic battle with emotional and mental pain you cannot get away from. I kissed my dad on the cheek as I had done since I was about yay high. I stepped out of the car with my right foot, and even though I knew I had to die that day, a tear rolled down my right cheek off my chin, and it landed on my right shoe. With a few clicks of the button, it was done. And there was also gone my medical coverage. I didn't know that all my medical coverage would disappear with those few clicks of those buttons. And that my father, if I survived, which I did, would bear the burden. I walked out to that bridge, feet heavy, heart palpitating, eyes red with tears. After 40 minutes, you guys all know what happened next. Ladies and gentlemen, I have lived 14 years past the day I should have died, and I believe it is for a positive reason. No matter how depressed I get, no matter how bad it turns, I will never attempt again. And every day of my life, until I die of natural causes, okay, every day of my life I will work in this field trying to help others. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why they call it the present. I look to you now, and I say, let us always and forever cherish today and every single day. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So does anybody want to have any comments or questions about the video? So I just want to remark on how Kevin stated that dropping out of college was a sign that something was wrong. He said that he clicked on a few buttons and unenrolled from college, and that was the day he jumped off the bridge. That was the day he decided he was going to commit suicide. So which leads us to, how do we support students in continuing their education? We want to promote and publicize available accommodations, services and supports to all students both on and off campus. Encourage students to get help before the issue grows. Share resources and strategies for addressing mental health issues and staying in school. Find ways to proactively reach out to students struggling in school, such as the Fresh Check days that you have here. You want to find ways, you want to follow up with a student to show support and genuine concern. I know that you don't have a direct influence on what I'm about to say next, but try not to penalize the students or revoke financial aid because of mental health issues. Use the resources around you by encouraging peer supports and clubs to reach out to their members and advertise that there is help on and off campus. And ask the students what barriers they might be facing that's preventing them from getting help. As we saw earlier, a huge barrier to students seeking treatment was that they didn't want to disclose. So here are some tips on helping students disclose. Give willing students opportunities to reduce stigma and educate others about mental health. Support programs that eradicate stigma on campus and help to make students more comfortable with disclosure. Make school policies on confidentiality and privacy visible and easily understood by all. Educate the entire campus community on mental health issues to eliminate any myths or stereotypes that make students uncomfortable with disclosure. Target mental health degree programs and work with them on stigma-busting activities to reduce the fear and concern of students in these programs. Provide resources on the pros and cons of disclosing so students can make an informed decision. So how do we reduce stigma on campus for students who need help? You want to provide information on campus and the community on common mental health conditions and the importance of getting help. You're doing this now. Good job, guys. Spotlight students, faculty, and staff who have achieved success living with mental health conditions to fight stigma and offer hope. Host on-campus educational activities and campaigns that combat stigma. Assemble celebrity or local speakers to talk about mental health. I'm not a celebrity, I'm just a local speaker, so don't worry, guys. Offer training for students, faculty, and staff to learn the facts about mental health. Treat mental health conditions with the same importance as other physical conditions and integrate services and supports. So when I say that, I really mean you really want to not separate and silo mental health and medical health. A lot of them it's tied together, like we saw on the other slides. If you're under stress, I mean, it's going to come out in your body and you're going to feel it. So today we've spoken a lot about signs and symptoms and what are the most prevalent health diagnoses. I would like to close today to focus on how to help if a student is experiencing a crisis. So here a student says, the school in which I was medically dismissed from did not respond well. They were too afraid to address the issue at hand, and they just sent me away. When a student is actively in crisis, you want to work with the student on how to prevent mental health crises and the best way to address them when they happen. Provide resources, referrals, and help immediately. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the MOT, which is Mobile Outreach Team, at the Southeastern Mental Health Authority. They usually have a 24-hour line, or someone will respond and with mental health crises. If you call the police and you want to help somebody in a mental health crisis, you can always ask for a CIT officer, crisis intervention trained officer. That's what CIT means. So you want to check in with the student after they have found assistance. Do not penalize students or revoke financial aid. Support students in contact with family and friends and their support network. Support networks, including family and friends, it is a huge help. You want to make sure that they don't feel alone. Encourage the student to contact professors and other educators if they miss classes and assignments. Be empathetic, non-judgmental, and understanding. And if you take one thing away from this presentation, please don't let it be that faux pas with the video. Please let it be that. Just be empathetic, non-judgmental, and understanding. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
My concern is not just students that have diagnosed mental illness, but students that are not so far along the continuum. So lots of our students have anxiety because they're overwhelmed, but they're not a mental illness diagnosis, right?
Right.
So can you address that as well?
Sure. So a lot of the times, that's how it starts out. It starts out as a small thing where, like we saw on the other slides, it's just regular anxiety. I don't want to go into this classroom because I think this professor has it out for me. Or I don't want to go to work because, you know, I'm just overwhelmed. They start avoiding these places and it starts to grow. If you can provide that support in the beginning and let them know, like, hey, there is mental health help outside, that's always a really good way to start. Because we don't want it to become that mental health services are an emergency service. They're not. They're here to help everybody. A lot of therapists see therapists for particular reasons because we understand that getting that support is crucial in life. So we're not siloed with mental health and regular health. So as we saw in the cartoon, there was, you want to hang out with friends, you want to be social, you want to take your medications if prescribed. A good diet is helpful. It's not everything, but you know, if you're sluggish, you probably don't want to be chugging down coffee all the time. It's going to increase that anxiety and increase that jitteriness. So I hope I answered your question. But yes, I understand what you mean that anxiety isn't always a diagnosis. Sometimes it's just a feeling that exists inside you, and that's normal. Sometimes some people push through, and sometimes people get the help they need, and it doesn't grow. Sometimes it just is anxiety in that moment.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, sure. I think I get, like this anxiety problem or this mental health issue problem. But now when you're in the classroom, right, and you don't really know what's really going on in the student mind, and just when this really happened, how can you intercept before, it happened? What kind of sign? Not that like those signs, sluggish or that. Like earlier sign that tells you, well, this person is having a mental illness. I can, I intervene before that happens.
So you can't always tell when someone has a mental health condition. It's not like they wear, like you said, it's not like they wear a sign. But in order to get to them before it gets any worse, or you want to prevent them from getting going into the hospital, what you really want to do is, again, promote that mental health is okay to talk about on campus. For so long, mental health has been such a taboo issue, you don't talk about it. Culturally, it's just not something that America likes to confront. So if you have your fresh check days, that's really important. Encourage your students to go. Encourage your students to seek help when necessary. Use the clubs that you have to say that, there are mental health services on and off campus. Even making your mental health services available online so that a student can check it out themselves, and reminding the students constantly that there are these services online. That's really good too. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi, sorry, Chris. Just to follow up on this, I gotta get a little more specific if we could here. So we suspect somebody in class needs to be approached. What are some of the strategies to approach them so that they don't turn away and we can start engaging in the conversation?
Well, I think that it goes down to how good of a relationship do you have? What are some of the things that you're seeing specifically about this student? So if this student is the typical student where they were doing really well and the grades start to dip, the best thing is to take them aside and confront them and say, hey, is everything going on? Everything okay? If you have that kind of relationship with a student, I think that's wonderful. If not, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking them aside anyway and saying, you know, I care about my students. I want to make sure you're okay. I don't want to see you fail in this class. Is there anything that I can help you with?
Okay, but if you get the typical, no, there's nothing, but you know there's something.
Right. I would then just give them the pamphlets. There are a bunch of pamphlets on your tables.
And I will say that we're going to be exploring that throughout today. We're
Oh.
actually going to be hearing in the next forum from students and their experiences. So they're going to share what's big, what happened with them, what was done at the college, support services, and then we're going to be hearing from faculty and staff and their experiences, and then we'll be wrapping up. So we actually will be giving a lot of different scenarios and hearing what worked or maybe didn't work.
Got it.
So that's
A little
our
ahead of
plan.
it, okay.
That's great.
It's a good question because I know it sounds really vague, but it really does depend on your relationship with the student. If they're constantly telling you, no, there's nothing wrong, there really isn't any more you can do other than what you did. You can approach them, you can let them know that there are mental health services in either here on campus or off campus. That's why the flyers that are on your table, those numbers are so important because you can't force somebody to call. All you can do is give them the help and let them and guide them to it. So I wish there was a better answer than that.
But you don't have any experiences where, you know, the person just says, no, there's nothing wrong, and you can't get it out of them?
I definitely have, where they just continuously say there's nothing wrong. And because I build such a different rapport, a therapeutic rapport with my clients, I'm able to say, hey, you know, it looks like you're struggling last week and point out points like, you know, maybe it's a grade. Hey, your grades you were doing really well. And I noticed that you're coming later and later to class. Your attendance is dipping. I don't want you to fail this class. I really want to help you and motivate you and see what I can do. It's that supportiveness that really comes from the professors and just people in general. So friends too. Any other questions?
Maybe I'm ahead on this one too, but I'll try it anyway. The blatant case, student walks up to you and says, I got problems.
Okay.
What do you do now?
I would then ask, you know, what kind of problems are you talking about? You know, try to be specific so that you can help them go to the actual therapist or go to the mental health center. Just so that it's not on you necessarily to save this person, but it is on you to educate the person about the resources that are available.
And I just want to add also,
Yeah.
you could walk the student down to the A wing. Oh, thank you.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, everybody.
You can always walk your student down to the A wing. You don't need to register them at the Welcome Center. Just walk them back to where the counselors are sitting. We're not licensed counselors, but we are trained helpers, and we'd be happy to help the student. And we could get them to the next step, to the therapist at Reliance House or other places. So just walk them right down. It doesn't usually work to just give them the room number and say go, but please walk them down.
And also I've had some faculty would say that they had a student in their classroom that was exhibiting some signs that they were concerned about and felt uncomfortable approaching. And so what they would do is say, hey, I've got class at this time and this date. They would tell me who the student was, and then I would just casually make a conversation in the hallway. Hey, how's classes going? You a new student? How's it going? I do some transfer stuff. Come down and talk with me. And then I can assess, is this person dangerous? Is this person suicidal? And so that it's not your responsibility to do that, but being understanding and compassionate and saying, hey, you know, we've got some people that you can talk to, and as you get comfortable knowing us, you can refer them directly to us. So, you know, we can intervene in different ways. So, okay, thank you.
That's wonderful that you have that service on campus. So. Anyone else?
Thank you. As far as financial aid is concerned, we don't revoke financial aid for students because many times they have an academic progress issue, they have to come and give an appeal, and the committee I'm on, when we read terms like anxiety, overwhelmed, mental illness, bipolar, or I'm taking medication, we automatically give them the benefit of the doubt, even if it's more than once, and let them go. I mean, I want them to succeed, so my committee and my staff always try to back up students when they have this issue. So there's no problem with that at TRCC. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Keep in the way. And it's forums like this where it's great that you share that kind of information, because this is where it's going to disseminate. This is where students are going to hear, you know what, if I'm struggling and if I'm having a real issue, I get the support that I need here through the counseling, through the financial aid. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Yes.
So maybe this is going to be addressed later also, but I thought I would just bring it up in case there's a burning issue with anybody. What about after hours?
So if
What about the people that are teaching after our delightful services people have gone home?
So if it's a genuine mental health concern, and somebody's coming to you and they're saying they're gonna hurt themselves or harm themselves, call the police immediately. Ask for the CIT officer, and you can also call the mobile outreach team at SMA. I'm not sure if it's on the papers that are on the table, but there's a mobile outreach team that will come and will assess, and you can just tell them what's going on. There's also one at UCFS, a mobile outreach team for underage. So if they're 18 or under, or sorry, 17 or under, there's a number for UCFS as well. That's if you're feeling really threatened or there's something just not sitting right in your gut, those are the numbers to call.
And Terry, we'll probably do more of that at the last part when we're actually doing the resources that are available to everybody, and we'll make sure we address before and after hours as well.
Well, just to follow up on that, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, learn as much as I can. If a person comes forward to us and says there's something wrong, you just said, is there a fear for them hurting themselves or hurting others? Would it be an unreasonable assumption to say if this person's actually coming forward, it's a pretty big problem that needs to be addressed regardless?
Yes, if somebody is genuinely reaching out for help, get it to them as fast as possible. If they are open in wing A, go right there.
Okay.
Any other? Thank you very much, Amanda. Very much, thank you.
So we will take a little bit of a coffee break here. If you want to fill your coffees, grab a last treat. We will be coming back in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we'll be talking to some students, and they'll be sharing their experiences. Thanks.